Hi, my name is Stacy Wixall, and welcome to Help. I need to make a resume now. This class will help you to know about 3 different types of resumes, and we'll go over some different resources that will definitely help you as you create your resume. The first thing I want you to remember before I even share my presentation is to first stay calm. You can do this if you stay calm and you follow the advice in this class. You'll be able to put together a really nicely created resume that will get the attention that you need from an employer who will take the time to interview you. So remember, just stay calm, and let's go ahead and see what you can do to put together a really nice resume. It's really not as bad as you think. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and here we go. You can't see it, but I have some controls. I just need to move a bit, and then we will make this a lot bigger so you can actually see it better. So help, I need to make a resume now. This is a presentation from the Macedon Public Library for all of those people who may find themselves in need of new employment. So what is a resume? Well, simply put, a resume is like an ad for yourself. It's how you can sell your value to an employer so they will invite you in to learn more. So think of it a little bit like a commercial for anything. The commercial doesn't tell you every single piece of information available about a product. For example, if they're selling soap, they don't tell you every single ingredient in the soap, although a soap like Ivory might take the time to tell you that it's purer than the other soaps on the market, but they don't tell you all the stuff that they do use. It's kind of like that. You want it to be a teaser. You want the employer to look at your resume and then say, wow, this person really has me interested. They look like someone I would want to work here. I need to talk to them to find out more. So in your resume, you need to clearly state what value you would add to the workplace if they were to hire you. You need to show some specific examples of how you have actually solved other problems in other workplaces. And when you're describing how you solved the problems, that's when you'll be able to include the skill set you bring in the examples. And you can show how you applied the skills that you have, which is so important. That's what employers really need to know, that you've worked other places, you've had other challenges, and when those challenges came up, you had the skills to be able to apply to the situation and make a positive impact. So that's really it in a nutshell. So let's go over some excuse me, important things to remember. You need to focus, focus, focus. So one fact is, your potential employer, and I don't want to scare you, but especially in light of the fact that many people will be looking for work in the days ahead. So potential employers could receive 100 or even more resumes for one single open position. Your resume really has to pack a punch, has to get them paying attention to information that will really pique their interests. And it has to do it in a couple minutes or less, because in fact, if you can make it powerful enough in something called your profile or pitch, which we'll go over in a minute, that it only takes, say, half a minute, 45 seconds for an employer or an HR person to look at it and be wowed, that's really what you're going for. Because when you have hundreds of resumes coming in, you don't have time to read every single word. And the only thing that's going to keep you reading is if your socks are knocked off right away. Your resume really needs to be well organized, and you should only put real, truthful examples with lots of really strong action words, verbs, to get your employer's attention. I can't stress enough, never bend the truth in your resume. It never leads to anything good. So don't be tempted to do that. I know it can be tempting sometimes for people to do it, but it's always best to stick with what's truthful. And chances are, if you sit down and you start thinking about all the different accomplishments you've had in other places, there's no reason you'll need to bend the truth. You'll have plenty of evidence of why you would be a great employee using things that are truthful. And finally, make sure you really read the employer's job description. Figure out what it is they're seeking. They don't make it a secret. The job ad is going to have certain terms, certain skills, certain technology tools that they will expect you to know. Focus on those things, and then connect those things to the skills and various examples you can show them that will show them that you're relevant to their needs. So connect your value to the value they're seeking. So I just talked a little bit about the idea of an elevator pitch. And you may have heard of this, like if you're a fan of Shark Tank, some of these shows. A pitch is when you can let someone know what you have to offer, what you bring to the table in like a half a minute or less. And you should be able to talk, it should talk a little bit about who you are, your personality, and your background. And most importantly, it should really highlight those skills you have to bring. So I have an example here in my presentation. John is seeking a job as an accountant. His speech is targeted and powerful. This is what he says right off under his header that has his name and contact info. In his resume, it says, I am a 20-year accounting veteran with experience realigning accounting auditing procedures for a Fortune 500 company who applies accounting principles to real-world problems to create economic efficiencies for both the firm and the customers. That's powerful stuff, especially if I'm someone who's looking for an accountant and I'm really interested in a problem solver that can save me money and save my customers money, who can know how to apply accounting principles to real life problems, and who has experience. This young man has experience realigning accounting auditing procedures. And he actually has 20 years of experience in the field. These are all things that are really gonna stand out to me, and hopefully they will stand out more than other people's pitch will. In fact, oftentimes people don't even include a pitch in their resume. So always make sure the pitch is like a huge advantage for you. So you wanna take the time to work on a pitch. So you're going to do this. You're going to write your own pitch. It should answer these questions. Who are you? What do you do? And what do you want to do? So John's pitch answered all three of the questions. Who is he? Well, he's an accountant with 20 years of experience. What does he do? He realigns and applies accounting principles for auditing procedures. And what does he want to do? He wants to work as a problem solver, and he wants to save you as an employer money and the customers money. Can you answer these questions for yourself in relation to the job that you're seeking? Take the time after this presentation to sit down and try. And you don't need to do this in 5 minutes. It may take an hour, take a couple hours. It's well worth every minute of your time to get the pitch exactly how you need it to be. And as an aside, this is about resume writing, but if you get this pitch right and you not only use it in your resume, but if you can commit it to memory, and if it's well done, it's not supposed to be a paragraph long. It should be like a sentence, maybe two, but usually it's like a sentence, and it should be very to the point and very easy for you to remember. So then if you happen to be somewhere, okay, right now we can't really be places, but eventually we will be able to be around people again. And it comes up that you're looking for a job, and one of your friends says, oh, really? I'm a hiring manager. What kind of thing are you looking to do? You have this pitch ready to go, because another great way to find employment is by networking. But that's another presentation. But having this pitch, it'll work in your resume and it'll work in real life. You just have to get it written and you have to remember it. Placing the pitch. So let's look at Patricia's resume. She has placed her pitch right below her profile. So you'll see here on the screen, we have Patricia Giordano, who is a loan officer looking for work. And it's important, she has it right under her name. It almost looks at the top like a little business card. So really quickly, if you're a hiring manager, you look at that and you know right away, you know her name, you know what kind of position she's after. She's a loan officer. You have her contact information. It's all really easy for the hiring person to ingest. And then the next important thing is her pitch. So I'm a hiring person. I know who she is and she wants to be a loan officer. Then I look at this profile and it answers the questions. She used more than one sentence, and that's okay. Do you know who she is? Do you know what she does, and do you know what she wants to do? Well, let's see. Experienced and attentive loan officer with several years of experience providing excellent customer service to clients seeking loans. Adept at thoroughly analyzing the financial status of clients and helping them to apply for and obtain the best loans for their lifestyle. Bringing forth a track record of increasing client satisfaction ratings while working in accordance with all company policies, ambitious and driven to reach new levels of success. It answers all the questions. One thing, I'm a little picky. If I were Patricia, I might try to work on it a little more, get a little more succinct. But overall, it's a pretty good pitch. You have a pretty good sense of who Patricia is. And the question is, does she match what you're seeking? There's a pretty good chance she might. So your job title is the next thing to consider. You need to have a sense of what it is you're after. And we talked about this. In Patricia's resume header, not only does her pitch let you know she's a loan officer, but it's highlighted because she put it right under her name. What's your job title? It's a really good idea to match the job title as it's advertised by the employer. So look at that job listing and see what do they call this person who's going to be hired for this position. It's also a good idea when you're sending out resumes, whenever possible, to match the language used in the job listing to your resume and also to your cover letter. It shows that you're not just sending out 50 resumes to anything without paying any attention. It shows that you're taking the extra steps and the extra care to match what it is the employer's looking for, which right there shows you have attention to detail and that, you know, you're a hard worker, you're not lazy, you're not just sending everybody the same thing, you're tailoring it. Always a good thing to do. So if you're not sure, let's say that somehow you come across a job description, maybe they're not real specific about what that job is, or maybe you are in a position where you're thinking, you know what, I want to be X, whatever that thing might be. And I do want to send out 50 resumes around the area to see if anybody might be interested in me doing X. But you don't know what is the right word to call X, okay? If that's your case, it's a really good idea to look at the Department of Labor's website, and this is called the Occupational Outlook Handbook, and I've given you the link here because two reasons. You can find out what an official title for the job you want to do is, and second of all, in reading more about that job, you can find out more of the keywords that employers will associate with that job description. And it's always good to be aware of what the lingo is that employers are going to associate with the job you want, because they'll be looking for it in your resume, number one. And number two, some of the bigger settings for jobs have tools that help them be able to sift through. If they get 100, 200 resumes for one job, they will put the resumes through a system that will track keywords. And they may only look at the 10 resumes that have the most use of the keywords that are relevant to that job. So it's a really good idea to familiarize yourself with what your job title is and what keywords go along with that job. Beyond your profile. So once you've gotten past your profile, then it's time to consider what are your core competencies. So these are all the skills that your employer is going to want you to have in place if they're going to seriously consider hiring you for the job. Core competencies that are prioritized by an employer will be found in the job posting. So again, it's always a good idea. I used to, before I got this job years ago, before I even knew I was going to be a librarian, and I was looking for different types of jobs, I would cut all the job listings out of the newspapers that you're interested in, or even if it's just one, cut it out of the newspaper so there's no distractions, and have that right on your desk next to you as you're creating your cover letter and your resume, because you can refer to what it is they tell you they want, because they don't make it a secret. It's all in there. If the job posting, usually they don't make it a secret. Occasionally you get a job posting that's rather short and maybe doesn't give you a ton of information. So that's when another great place to go to find core competencies is something called ONET online. I've given you the website address. If you go to this site, you can search by your job title, and then you'll get a summary of the skills, knowledge that you'll need to have, and technical requirements you'll need to have if you're going to have a chance to get this job. And you can use these things, again, as you're crafting your resume. You can weave in all these core competency areas into your descriptions. But again, I'm going to repeat it because, as I said, I can't repeat this enough. If you see something as a core competency, but you haven't actually ever exhibited this competency, you've never had an experience where you actually could prove that you could do it, don't say you know something that you don't know. It's okay. Focus on the things that have to do with the job that you can prove you know, okay? Very important. So now we're going to get into resumes and the three types that exist. The first one is called a chronological resume. This is the one that will highlight your work history right in order, and you'll list the most current experiences you've had first, and then in reverse order, you'll go down and tell your other jobs before the one you're currently in. So let's say right now you work, I don't know, say you're managing a small store, and let's say 5 years ago you were managing a shoe store, and let's say 3 years ago before that you might have been working in a factory. So you would put the first job, the job you're in now, first on the list, and then you'd go backwards. They always like to see where you are now and then work back. So here's a sample. So let's say that this was the previous person, the loan officer. It says, senior loan officer, your hometown bank, July 2010 to present. And then she has a little description, make bulleted list. Well, I didn't fill this in. By the way, any resume on here I made up. But she would make a bulleted list of responsibilities demonstrating all the competencies that go along with the job she's applying for now and relate to this particular job. And then she'd go to the next one, loan officer, hometown savings and loan, February 2005 to June 2010. Again, she'd make her bulleted list, and it would be various examples of responsibilities and skills she exhibited that go along with the job, according to ONET, and are also requested in the job posting. Now look at the dates. Her dates are not super specific. In other words, she doesn't say July 1st, 2010 until present. She just says July. And for the one before that, she says February 2005 till June 2010. So we don't know if there was a big gap, like maybe she lost her job or moved on June 2nd, 2010 and didn't start at your hometown bank until July 25th, which is a bit of a gap. And that's okay, you can do that. That's still truthful. Sometimes if you have bigger gaps in your chronological work history, you can also, and by a bigger gap, when you start to talk about months, and months turn into nearly a year being unemployed, it's okay. Now you have to tell the truth if the employer asks you in an interview for more information about that. But on the resume, if you put 2010 to present, and in the one previous to that, if you put 2005 to 2010, that's okay too. I would put the month and the year if you're able to, and I would just put the year if you have which you consider to be significant gaps. It's just common practice. If the employer has questions about your job experience, your history, they will ask you, and it's always a good policy to just explain whatever happened. Don't make anything up. But on paper, you are okay to do the month and the year, or just the year. And one more thing I want to say about chronological is the whole concept of being chronologically orientated means that the focus of this type of resume is really on your work history. Functional resume. So this kind of resume will really highlight acquired skills that are relevant to this job you're trying to apply for. And you'll be putting together brief paragraph style sections that demonstrate various skills you have acquired through working at different organizations. Your chronological history is given in a lot less specific sort of way, because that's not really what you're trying to highlight. And it's really good for people that may have really large gaps in their employment. For example, if you happen to be someone who stayed home with children for a few years and now you're trying to get back into the workforce, this sort of resume can really be a great one to use. For some people that are graduating college or even high school and you don't have much of a chronological work history, but maybe you have other experiences that you would be able to use in lieu of having actual work experiences, this could be another way to highlight what you've done. And I went over here to show you that what it would look like. We just kind of talked about it. So if you just put the year till the present, but to be honest with you, this isn't the best example. I have an example resume that I've made that is better than this example. So let me just go forward and we'll get to that in a few minutes. A combination resume, it's a hybrid of the two that we just talked about. So it's not just all focused on your work history, and it's not just all focused on the various skills that you have rather than the work history. It sort of pulls from both. So if you will, it's the best of both worlds. And employers really do like it because they get to not only see where have you been, but where have you been, and you're highlighting all the different skills that you applied in these different locations, and even giving examples of how you've solved problems using the requisite skills. So it's a really good one to use, and it really shines a spotlight on the value you have to bring. So if you can do both and do the combination resume, I would say of the three, I would highly recommend this resume. So what to include in your resume? You will need to have a header. The header includes your name, address, personal telephone number, email, job title, and if you happen to have a LinkedIn account, you can put that in there too. Your profile, it's like the elevator pitch. Some people call it a career summary. You could call it an executive summary. Normally it goes right below the header, and this is what's going to really let the employer know right away what you're all about, what value you bring to the table. This is your hook. This gets their attention. Then after that, depending on the style of resume, the body of the resume is normally, it's normally a history of where you've worked. If it's a functional resume, you'll be telling where you worked or what experiences you've had, but the focus will be on the skills that you bring to the table. And if it's a combination, then it'll be a chronological history, and then under each place where you've worked, you'll go ahead and give them enough of a description to have a feel for what you brought to the table when you were at that location, how you were a problem solver, how you applied your skills, and what skills you in fact have. Keywords, we talked about this. Make really sure that you include core competencies that you will find on those sites I recommended that relate to the job, and that you're using words that are definitely related to the job you want. And as we talked about, larger companies often sort resumes using software to look for these keywords. So give yourself that edge. Use the keywords that you can honestly say you exhibit when you are able to work in this position. And endorsements. An endorsement, I've kind of gone a little broad with this, but it would be any accreditations, licenses, professional associations. Maybe you've had a civil service position and you have a grade, citations, publications, patents, any awards, any direct quotes you might have from supervisors, those things can be included. In fact, with the written or verbal quotes, maybe you've saved all the evaluations you've ever gotten from your boss, or you have a good memory and you know that, let's say you're an accountant and you worked on some sort of a project and the boss said, you did a great job. You just saved this company $1 million because of this reorganization of how we did whatever. Hopefully they wouldn't say it exactly like that. They'd be more specific, obviously, but it's okay to put those things in. So you tell them the skills, you describe a little problem, or actually a big problem that you've solved. And then if you honestly have a quote from a supervisor that you can put in quotes afterwards, that's really powerful stuff. And I do encourage you to use anything like that that you might have. It can be helpful, but always, again, make sure that it's truthful, because the employer may call this organization where you used to work and say, is this true? You know, did he save your company $1 million? And were you really excited about it? If they are on the other end with a long pause and I don't know what you're talking about, well, then you've just shot yourself in the foot. So make sure what you say is true. And if you have glowing remarks that were actually either written or said to you, go ahead and find ways to put them in. Education, people always wonder, what do I do with my education? So in general, if you've just graduated at any level, you want to put your education more toward the beginning of your resume. And then you can list your majors, major or majors, and your any minors, any honors, the date of the degree, and the type of degree you ended up with. You don't need to include your high school information if the last place you graduated from was a college. You don't need to put high school on a resume. However, if you did graduate high school and went to college, but you didn't complete college, you want to list the name of the college and the years that you attended. And then list your high school below that and the date that you graduated high school. And you might want to consider putting that information more toward the end of the resume. Sometimes people think if they did only some college, but they didn't complete, that it might be better not to put that on the resume. However, many employers are very happy to know that you did go to college, and oftentimes if the sort of coursework you did relates to the position that you're interested in, it can really help you out even though you didn't complete it. And you can always have a conversation if you get invited to the interview, you know, about what might have gotten in the way of completion. If you've been in your field for a very long time, you know, 5, 10, 15 years more, place your education information at the end of the resume. That's where they expect it to be. Your experience should speak more at that point than your education, although it's nice for them to see that you did attain a degree somewhere. If you have recently obtained professional training above and beyond your degree, you can put this after your degree information. And don't be shy about putting any above and beyond type training you might have done. Like if you've taken Microsoft Office classes or other type technology type classes to make sure your tech skills are really current and up to date. And the classes, if you took classes 10 years ago, maybe you don't need to put those on the resume. But if within the last 1, 2, 3 years, if you've really brushed up on some tech skills, it is a good idea to put that on your resume, because employers this day and age are definitely looking for people whose tech skills are current, because technology is constantly changing. It's changing rapidly. They like to see that you're the type of employee that's going to stay on top of that. So definitely put that on your resume. Leave these things out of the resume. Just don't do it. Do not put a title on your resume, like resume at the top. Don't do it. It does not, it's not appropriate. Your availability sometimes, and I know I hire people where I work, and sometimes people think it's helpful to tell when they're available. My advice is it comes off wrong, and the time to discuss availability is at that point when you're offered the job, or if it comes up in an interview and your potential employer asks you directly, you know, when would you be available if I were to hire you? Then you can bring that up, but don't put it in your resume or your cover letter. It's not going to help you out. Do not get on a whole rant about why you are leaving your current position. And even if it's not a rant, even if it's done in a positive way, still, you don't need to put that in there. Please don't. Your current salary or any demands you might have for a potential new employer. No. Salary and anything you might want to ask for, if you are to the point where they're offering you the job, then you can do some negotiation. But if you don't have a job offer, it is not the time to be talking about those things. You do not put your age, race, religion, sex, or national origin in a resume. Photographs or a written physical description, it's not a dating service. You don't need to do that. Some people, there's a debate about the whole photograph thing. Occasionally I read articles where I've read that it can be helpful if you have a small little thumbnail picture of yourself next to your name in the header. I don't really recommend it, but I know that sometimes people do it, but I personally would not recommend that. You don't need to talk about your childhood background or your marital status, and definitely you don't need to come out and list all your weaknesses. So those are things to leave out. Remember, you're trying to paint yourself in the best light possible, so you want to highlight everything positive that you have to bring to the table. So when you're trying to decide what things to put in a resume, you want to be focused on all the positive skills, all the positive examples of you solving problems or saving the company money or offering outstanding customer service. Those are the things the employer wants to hear about. Oops, I went backwards. References. You don't need to include any references on your resume. Instead, you should have another section, like make a little subtitled section called references, and write references are available upon request. And in truth, you don't even need to go, you don't even have to have that, but if you want to have that, it's okay. The employer can't ask you, like, the employer can't call your references unless you actually give permission for them to do so, and usually you sign something, and usually it's the job application. Nobody ever reads the fine print on a job application. Well, I shouldn't say no one, but a lot of people don't. But if you read all the tiny little print, it says in there that you're giving permission for references to be called. And people often wonder, why are you making me fill out a job application? I just gave you a resume and a cover letter, and my two last born children. Why? It's because of that they need to have you sign off so that if they want to call your references, they can. In a completely separate file, you're gonna keep and wait until the employer asks for it. You're gonna list 3 to 5 references with current contact information. And you always wanna make sure that your references know when you're actually in pursuit of a new job, because there's nothing worse for the employer or your reference than them calling someone to ask about you, and the person is just dumbfounded because they don't know what's coming, and they're just off kilter, and it usually doesn't go very well for anyone. So make sure if you are looking for a job, you let your references know, hey, I'm looking for a job. If you know you've narrowed it down to say 3 to 5 jobs that you're applying for, not a bad idea to say, and here are the jobs I'm actually applying for, in case you might happen to get a call. I'd like to use you as a reference. And then they kind of have a sense for, okay, Johnny's looking for a job, and I know these places could be calling me. And then when, you know, whatever the place is, the hospital calls, the hospital's HR department calls, they aren't surprised. They know immediately when the person says, hello, this is Bill from whatever general hospital. They're not surprised. They know, oh, look at that, I'm already getting a call. In this file, you want to keep track of it at least every, well, definitely when it's time to be looking for a job. If it's been some time since the last time you used your references, you want to look at those references with a cold eye, and you want to make sure that no matter how much you like the people, make sure that the people on it are freshly aware of you. If you've got some really old references on your list, you want to make sure you go ahead and ask some new people to be references and replace some of the older people with newer people, because you want people to be able to speak to the skills you have now and who you are now, not the person you may have been 5 or 10 years ago. So contact your references periodically to make sure that all the information is still good and that they're still willing to be a reference and to replace the older ones. Oh, and lastly, if you happen to get divorced, or you've been remarried, or you just got married, or your name has changed for any other conceivable reason, please give your references a call to let them know you're looking for a job and everything, and find out their contact, and make sure you tell them your name's changed, because they may not, that might have been off their radar. So when Bill from the general hospital calls to talk about you, and they say your name is something totally different than what they know you as, they're going to say, I'm sorry, I don't know who that is. Very important. It really does happen. So if you've had a name change, you want to make sure all your references are well aware of it. So writing the resume, really quick. We talked about we're going to have core competency verbiage throughout. You're going to have succinct bullet points or short paragraphs of only 3 to 4 succinct sentences. And verbs, I can't stress enough. Use verbs. The people hiring, they want to have a feel for what you can do. And you want to use action words like analyzed and launched, advanced, compiled, allocated. You get the picture. Don't use forms of the verb to be. It's boring. It's passive. It doesn't hook them in, and you'll end up in the circular file. Also, the verb to have, not a good one. You want ones that are actions that show what you do. We've said this a million times, but always be honest about everything you put in the resume, and don't even bend the truth. Don't even be tempted. The length of your resume, rule of thumb, it should be as long as it needs to tell your story in a targeted, concise way. So you want to be able to say everything you need to say, but you have to also make sure that you are very concise in how you say it. If you can say something in one page and cover it, that's great. Employers actually like that. Don't go on and on for 3 to 5 pages. You might think it makes you look amazing. It doesn't. It makes you look verbose. Employers really like to see that you can organize your resume well, and I'd say 1 to 2 pages is probably enough. And if you can get it on one page without it being cramped and teeny tiny, do it. But if you need the second page so that you have a nice look, you want it to be not cluttered and not in tiny little font, go to the second page, because you don't want to sacrifice yourself to having font that made the HR person squint too hard to be bothered reading. When you pick your font, make sure you're picking something that is business-like. Times New Roman, Arial, Garamond, Calibri, Cambria, Helvetica. One of my favorites is Helvetica, actually. Just pick something that looks business-like. Do not pick anything that looks like calligraphy or human writing or any kind of script. If it's fancy schmancy or artsy looking, or if it looks like something you might use to make a birthday card for your best friend, those aren't fonts you want to use for a resume. The fonts you use for a resume are no-nonsense, business-like fonts. I can't stress this one enough. Make sure you spell check your resume. Use the computer spell checker. And then also have a friend or a family member read through it. Does it make sense? Do they find anything that somehow the computer might have messed up on? Or occasionally use spell checker, and if you're not thinking and you just do whatever it recommends, sometimes you change something that's correct and make it wrong. So a human being can tell the difference. So have 1 or 2 friends or family members look it over with a critical eye to make sure that everything's in order and you don't have mistakes. Sending it out, make sure it's on decent paper. You know, the recommendation is usually 20 to 25 pound paper, 8.5 by 11. Use white or cream. You don't want to get into patterned borders or strange colors. Keep it business-like. That's appreciated. If you do pick a cream paper, make sure everything matches. Your cover letter should be cream, your envelope should be cream, and your resume should be cream. Everything should be cream. You don't want to have a hodgepodge of paper. It just looks like you're not very detail-oriented. It sends the wrong impression. Today, you usually have to email resumes, or it's very common that you do. If you need to email your resume, you want to make sure that whoever receives it can read it and it looks just as nice on their screen as what it looked like on yours. If you just attach, most people use Word. So if you attach a Word document into an email, there is a very good chance, since not everybody has the same version of Word, or some people might use Google Drive or some other document creator. If you just attach it as a Word doc or whatever, and they get it, it may show up looking like a terrible mess. And it really does happen. So the way to avoid that, make sure you save your resume as a PDF file. That will keep your formatting consistent no matter what they open it with. And it will look good. It'll look as good as it did on your screen. It'll look the same on their screen. So very important. PDF. And please, please, please never, ever, 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 ever cut and paste your resume from a Word doc or whatever into an email. Do not cut and paste into an email. It's a very huge no-no. Don't do it. So now I'm going to show you a few samples, and before I leave, I just want to remind, well, I'm not leaving, but before we leave this screen to look at a different screen, I want to remind you that this is a recording, so go ahead and pause it and really look over the various samples, and please consider using them as templates for your own resume. I think they're pretty good examples, and they should help guide you as you create your own resume. And also remember to go ahead and look at the Occupational Outlook Handbook and Own It Online to help you to craft the best descriptions with the most relevant words for that job you're trying to seek. So I am going to stop this share, and now I'm going to share a different screen. Technical glitch happened, but as I was saying, this is the Occupational Handbook, and you can search using this box right here, and this is ONET, same idea. Search using this box right here, and with both of them you will get really useful language that you can put into your resume that will be very powerful, and you will have those keywords that, especially if you're trying to break into a big industry or a very large workplace where there's a strong chance that they'll use keyword searching software to sort resumes, you definitely in that case would want to check these out, because they will help you have the right keywords that they're looking for. And here are some resume examples that I made. So the first one is Jim Doe, and Jim Doe has a chronological resume. He is interested in being an operations manager. He's written it very nicely right under his name, and he has a nice pitch right in the forefront. He called his pitch executive summary. Oh, and by the way, I didn't say this, but don't call it your elevator pitch or anything like that. It's either career summary, executive summary. You want to call it something professional. So in his executive summary, he lets you know who he is, what he does, what he wants to do very clearly. And then the spotlight is on his experience over the last few years. So he's been a manager at Comfort Inc. And then he takes the time to tell you a little bit about that, what he did there. He was a data network manager, and notice he just puts years, and that's fine. Data network manager, and he tells you what he did there. And then he was an instructor pilot, and he tells you what he did in that capacity. Talks about his education at the end, and he does have an aviator's license, and that's it. It's short and sweet. His resume did end up on the second page. He did not go ahead and try to squeeze everything. He probably could have, but it wouldn't have looked as nice. And actually, since Jim Doe is actually me, I can tell you, I played with it, and it would not have looked very nice if it was made in a tiny font. It would be too hard to read. So in that case, it's much better to go to the next page. Make sure if this happens and you do a second page, you're going to put a header just on the second page that has your name, and it has page 2/out of 2. So that way, if somehow the staple or the paper clip, however you fasten this together, if page 2 gets lost, they'll know whose resume this goes with. You don't want some other person to get credit for your information. So really make sure that you do that. And also, I just want to take a minute to note that although it's nice to know where his education came from and that he can fly airplanes, not super critical for someone who wants to be an operations manager, right? All the most critical stuff is right here on page 1. And it's important to note that. So if you get yourself into a situation where your resume is going to be 2 pages long, try to really strategically make sure the most important information about you ends up on page 1, because it does happen that the second page of a resume, once it's printed, very easy for it to get lost. And so you want to make sure the most important things are right there on page 1. Although if you're emailing it, of course, you won't have that problem. But then again, you don't know, because it could be they have somebody that receives the resumes and prints them and hands them off to another boss who may never see them in the digital format and only be dealing with paper. So it pays to have the header, and it pays to put the most important stuff on page 1. So that was chronological. So it really, the spotlight's on where he worked and what he did. The next one is functional. So Janet Smith, she's a phlebotomist, and she tells you right under her name. She gives you a career summary. She's letting us know what she really wants people to know is that she has a demonstrated track record in blood banking, in the blood banking care environment. And she's also taken a moment to list some key skills she really wants to highlight a lot right here. And that's an okay thing to do, especially if I don't know what the job description might be for Janet Smith, but I'm going to assume that the job description had some of these things right in it, like AABB accreditation or knowledge of quality assurance. And she's got that highlighted, which is a really good strategy. So if you look here, she calls this not work history, but professional accomplishments. And most of this stuff, you're not seeing a whole lot of, you're not seeing names of places so much, you're not seeing dates, because for whatever reason, this person, let's see, I can't remember what I said now. So she had been in the broadband industry before she decided to go back to college and become a phlebotomist with a specialty in EKG phlebotomy, okay? So being in the broadband industry and being in the medical industry don't necessarily have a whole lot in common, but because she did it this way, she could break out the different areas, and really she managed to use her program management at Spectrum to her advantage, because she could pull out things that might also parallel things that would be done if you were managing a blood drive or working in a blood drive type of location. So this type of resume really works for her. Also, if you look at the date that she completed her education, it's 2015. And right now, okay, so she facilitated educational projects from 2016 to 2018 in the Rochester area blood collection sites. So it kind of looks like there may have been somewhat of a gap. Like she may have had gaps because she was in one industry and then for whatever reason she decided to get in a different industry. Who knows? Maybe this woman was in the broadband industry initially and got married and started a family and stayed home for a bit, and now she's decided, hey, I want to go a different direction. So she got this education to be able to go in a different direction she's interested in. The point is, rather than putting something like that on a resume, how are you going to translate that? So, you know, you were in one industry and you stayed home with your kids, and then you went back to school, and then you know, did some things that were maybe internships out of school, and it's tricky. This is a great way to do it. It makes it a lot cleaner. It makes it a lot easier for the employer to really see what you have to offer, even though it's not in as traditional a format as the chronological resume. It still gives you that chance that you need. And I can tell you that years ago, when I got my first library job, I ended up doing something like this to get my first job, because it's difficult if you stay home for a number of years and you've got like this work history, but it becomes really old and stale. And college is good, but it you know, it's not the same as experience. So this gives people a way to pull from things that could be from quite a while ago, but are still relevant, without really highlighting, hey, you know, 15 years ago, I was this supervisor at Spectrum. You know, that doesn't come out off. It doesn't help you to come off as best as you could. This way, it helps you a lot. So it's a good thing to do. And I recommend it for certain situations. And then this is kind of like I said before, it's the best of both worlds. It's a combination resume sample. So George Johnson, and I purposefully did his a little bit differently. Oh, I forgot to point out this. So if you look at the first one, it's all black and white. Well, I think this, I made a little bit of a gray. I grayed some things just to make the position titles really pop. But this one, for the most part, it's black and white, but it works. It's clean. There's plenty of white spaces. Hopefully, I don't think I missed any spelling or grammatical type errors. But it looks good. It's clean. It's easy to read. It's easier to follow. The next one, it is okay to use one other color if it's used in a way to help guide the employer through your resume. So Janet, I went with a red for hers because she's interested in drawing blood for a living. So it seemed like a good idea to have this little bit of red, but it's not used frivolously. It's used in a way that draws the eye through the resume headers and helps keep the employer focused and wanting to read on. And again, hers has, it's very clean, plenty of white space, easy to follow. The font's business-like, and I don't have to squint to read it. So, and then George barely uses any color, but just to make his name pop, to help you remember, hey, I'm George Johnson. He's got this pop of a sort of a burgundy color, and then the double line here below his header, just to give him a little style, you know, a little style, but not too much, just enough to make his stand out a little bit from some of the other resumes that they're gonna get. And as I said a few minutes ago, this is a combination style resume. So he is, first of all, he's telling you, he doesn't put his job title right under his name. Instead, he tells you his job title here. He doesn't call it a career summary or an executive summary. Puts his job title down, and then he goes into his pitch. So his hook is he can effectively manage staff in both the blood bank and business arenas. And he's results oriented, high energy, hands-on professional with 10 plus years, and it goes on and it answers all the questions. And he also did, like the previous woman, he has his key skills all bulleted just to make them pop even further. And then after all of that, then we get his professional experience. So in his case, we have the names of the places where he's working or has worked or is working, what his title is, and then he has his descriptions of what it is he does. And there's plenty of verbiage in his descriptions that if you were an employer in these industries, you know, it would definitely catch your eye. He even notes accomplishments, like providing daily operational review, quality control of educational accountability to meet regulations. And he was responsible for ensuring uncompromised compliance with 23 organizational quality systems. So that's a good thing to do, as I said before. And then he goes on and he tells you he worked for Core Communications in Rochester as a cable television supervisor. And he tells you what he's accomplished there and what he did. He gives you his education at the very bottom, and he has both certifications and he has informational technology skills, which is a really smart thing to put, because as an employer, I've said it before, I'll say it again, it's very helpful. Employers like to see that you have tech skills and that they're skills that will be useful in their environment. He also noted that he had an excellent GPA, and sometimes people ask about that. If I'm going to put down my college and my degree, should I be putting my cum in there? If you have a really high cumulative average, you can go ahead and put it in. I think the number of years since you attained the degree, if it's been 20 years, even 10 years, maybe leave it out. I think that if it's within the decade that you went to college and graduated, having the GPA in there isn't going to hurt. It'll probably never hurt you, but I mean, generally speaking, once you get a decade of experience under your belt, this is what employers are really going to be looking at. So, and this gentleman has an interesting resume because he wants to be an education coordinator / supervisor, and he has some experience in that area as an education manager for the Red Cross, but he also has this interesting job as a cable television supervisor. So trying to merge the two together to try to become an education coordinator / supervisor, which I'm going to assume, I don't know, maybe he's trying to cross into the public school system or something. I don't know what his what he's applying for, but you can see that basically when you do the combination, you're combining the other two resumes, you're listing lots of different core competencies along with the places you've worked and the dates that you've worked there. And it just gives the employer the most complete picture you possibly can of yourself. And I think it's a pretty good idea to do. So I hope you learned a lot from this presentation. I hope that it will help you to get whatever type of job it is that you really want to get. And I wish all of you the best of luck. And thank you for tuning in. Bye.